Hello, everyone. A very good evening. It is absolutely my pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of Team Avatar and my avatar to the third edition of Diversity Mahotsav. Diversity Mahotsav 2023. I am Janani Sampath and I will be your host for today's evening. As we start, here are a few hygiene checks for a seamless virtual experience. Please close all other applications on your computer and log out from your organization's VPN to conserve internet bandwidth. We would like to thank our partners, powered by partner Kellogg Brown and Root Engineering and Construction India Private Limited, supporting partners Genesis and EPAM Systems India Private Limited, and our outreach partner MCCI, Madras Chamber of Commerce and Industries. Our social media hashtags are hashtag Diversity Mahotsav, hashtag Celebrating Diversity. Do post your experience at Diversity Mahotsav on your SM handles with these hashtags. I would also like to inform you all that all the Diversity Mahotsav episodes are being live streamed on our YouTube channel. You can watch the Diversity Mahotsav live on your YouTube. Click on the link that is pasted on the chat window. My dear esteemed guests, welcome to day 8 of Diversity Mahotsav, where the spotlight shines not only on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also the very essence of how it should be celebrated, how a human kaleidoscope should be celebrated. So, a little bit about Diversity Mahotsav. It's a month-long festival of sharing, learning, celebrating the uniqueness of every individual, and carrying with us the promise of inclusion into the new year. And it is hosted by Avatar, myavatar.com, which is the brainchild of Dr. Soundarya Rajesh, founder, president, Avatar Group. Dr. Soundarya Rajesh is among India's most prominent leaders in the space of women's workforce participation. Avatar, the social enterprise founded by Dr. Soundarya, is India's only organization that provides both strategy and implementation solutions in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Her work in creating careers for women in the Indian workplace is unparalleled, for which she is referred to as the career doctor. Not only is she among the earliest and most impactful voices to speak, write, and teach about gender inclusion, she has also helped hundreds of companies hire thousands of women professionals through Avatar's work. She is a powerful speaker, author, and a very sought-after DEI strategist. Now, coming to today's session, allyship, understanding privilege. A little bit about privilege before we delve into this session. We don't have to feel guilty about a privilege, but we do have a responsibility to acknowledge it and use it in service of others. These are the words of Brittany Packnett Cunningham, a very well-known American activist. So in those two lines, we understand what privilege is, and it is about recognizing that the world is unequal and that we all play a role in either perpetuating or challenging the inequality. Today, to understand privilege, allyship, understanding privilege for this session, we have none other than Rahul Murdeshwar, Senior Accounting Director at Dow India. He is well known as an exceptional male ally, a title he has rightfully earned through his dedicated actions. Rahul has always believed in creating an inclusive environment. He is a determined individual known for a systematic and well-planned approach to everything he undertakes. As the Dow India ERG sponsor for the Women Inclusion Network and a mentor for the We Merge program, Rahul embodies inclusive leadership by fostering an atmosphere wherein all individuals feel comfortable expressing themselves. Rahul's strategic mindset and pleasant leadership style makes him a go-to leader. He passionately advocates the Rising Talent Program, creating an environment that has helped develop talent in his team and the company, ultimately contributing towards an inclusive culture. Rahul is a man of action and has taken concrete steps to bridge the diversity gap by actively recruiting and nurturing women. His actions have empowered employees and instilled confidence in female colleagues, fostering a great sense of inclusivity, an enabler of equity and equality, a perfect male ally. And it's not just that, Rahul was the choice of jury for Male Ally Legacy Award by Avatar and Seramount in 2023 Best of the Best Conference. This award is recognition of efforts, the tireless efforts and visionary approaches made by male allies to challenge stereotypes and to be an inspiration for others and create a supportive ecosystem. So it's a pleasure to have you with us today, Rahul, as we connect to have a freewheeling conversation around allyship, understanding privilege. A warm welcome to you in this session.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jenny. Thanks for those kind words.
And we look forward to having a very 360-degree view at how you have emerged to be such an enabling male ally. So to begin with, let's get to the basics. How would you define privilege, particularly in the context of leadership and workplace dynamics?
Sure. Thanks. And thanks to Avatar for calling me for this event and sharing my views. So let's talk about leadership and workplace dynamics in two different ways. So coming to leadership, actually for a man, it tends to be a lot more easier compared to a woman who has to think about, so we study, we get selected for a job, we straight away get into work. For most male, especially in the Indian context, it's a question of just getting straight away into work and doing whatever you want to do. And if you do well, if you do the right things, if opportunities come up, you won't think twice about grabbing those or even specifically asking for different roles. When it comes to the female gender, though, they do have a lot more things to take into consideration, right? So whether it's depending on the household responsibility, especially if she's married, she's got kids. I've seen a lot of women in my career that I've coached or mentored where they're actually hesitant to even apply for leadership positions because they're not sure if they'll be able to take on that responsibility. Some of them think that, oh, if you take on a higher leadership role, it means that it's going to come with a lot more responsibility for other people. May also mean I need to work a lot more, like work late and different hours, and it's going to be a difficult thing. So many more considerations are there for women compared to men. So I think it's a privilege for us as men to not have many things to consider in the first place. So that's from a leadership point of view. When it comes to workplace dynamics, there tend to be a lot of, like you talk about men going out in a group, whether it's coffee talk or even in the evenings, they go for drinks, late night dinners. That's not something which everyone can do, right? So many of the conversations and even some job offers tend to get struck during those conversations, which is not the way it should be, but that can happen. Thankfully, at least in our company, I know that it's a very fair way of selecting people. We have a panel where we have people who are the hiring manager is there, of course, but that person comes in at the end. There are three other independent people who are there, and there's always a female on the panel. And based on their independent assessment on the criteria, we look at the scores, and that's how the considerations are done before you hire someone. So at least in this company, I've not seen that, but I have heard of enough stories around on this topic. So yeah, that's one view.
Rahul, what struck me the most when you began this conversation was that, that acknowledgement of that privilege that,
Yes.
for men, it's a kind of it's a very, very set path, you study, you get a job, and you go ahead with your career. And this is in fact, while we were talking about privilege, this is one thing. It's not at all bad to have privilege, but it is also the humility with which most actually acknowledge that it is privilege. So it comes through very, very, very clearly through what you said so far. So in your case, what you believe has been a privilege, specifically in your case, and how did you discover it? I'm sure there was a moment of epiphany or many moments of epiphany that led to this. If you can share those with us.
So many moments is right. So let me start with one such thing, especially with relation to my wife. It's a love marriage, and we take many things for granted as men. So after marriage, women are expected to change their name. My wife is a very evolved personality, and she actually chose to continue with her maiden name. That was new for me, but I realized because I've worked abroad. I've been in Singapore, I've worked in Philippines, and there it's perfectly okay to do that. But in India, it's taken very seriously. So I know how much of difficulty she had to go through when it came to immigration, government offices, where people will ask, "Oh, but meaning they would basically say you're not married. Why? Because the husband's name is not attached. It's a very
Yeah.
simple thing, but just one thing in that sense. Other than that, we talked about job offers that happened. Well, it happened to me in my earlier company. So my first company, my boss was coming for a visit. I go back to drop him on the airport, and in the car he says, "You know what? We're going to move the accounting work out from here and move it to the Philippines. You won't have a job, but you are a good guy. You can get a job there. Will you join?" Like on that was the discussion. And I mean, on the spot I was saying, okay, why not? I didn't think too much. I said yes, and we ended up actually going to the Philippines. That was in my first company. So we went to the Philippines. We were there for 8 years, and this is an example where I took the decision in a spot. Of course, I discussed it later on with my wife, made sure things were okay, but it took some time before we were all okay with that in her family because we had just gotten married. But if I were to put myself in her shoes, she was actually working in an accounting and auditing firm. But because we went to the Philippines where there were visa issues, she could no longer do that. So she actually changed her career. She's a counseling psychiatrist, counseling psychologist, and completely different career change. Now, she's doing very well in that, and she's glad she got out of accounting, but that's a different issue. But the fact is that that's what it is. Now, if there was any other woman in my place, I doubt anyone would just say yes, right? So that's another example. So yeah, that's where the realization started to come for me, I guess.
No, we hold on to that point in which you shared about the influence your wife has had on your journey so far, and we also believe that it has also shaped your allyship journey because that's what
For sure.
you actually began to talk about. So tell us about it. How did this unravel? So how has she shaped your journey so far? If you can
So
continue
she's
with that, yeah.
yeah, sure, I will. So let's take the move to Philippines, right? So my father used to be in a bank, and because of that, it was a transferable job. We moved houses many times. For her, she was born and brought up in the same place in Matunga 25 years till she got married to me. And then I come into her life, and then we move houses at least 8 times because we've gone abroad 3 times, come back. So all that has happened only mainly because of me, except one move. Um, she herself is a social scientist, so she's actually worked on a thesis. So when we were in Singapore, that was the last time we were abroad in the same company. When we were in Singapore again, she had to discover things for herself. So she was studying in NUS, National University of Singapore, where she did a thesis on Indian women who used to work while in India, but they got married, and because they got married, they moved to Singapore, and they could not work. And this is a class of women that nobody talks about. So she picked up that topic, went and specifically talked to, I don't know, 25 to 30 women, and then actually wrote a very detailed thesis on that, which actually won her the best thesis award. I was involved in the way she did that thesis, and I went through that entire book, and that really opened up the challenges that women have to go through at every stage of the way, right from education to marriage to post marriage to children, etc., etc. So a lot of experience that I got. The other experience I would say is just managing the house. So the only exception to my career journey was when we moved to London. So we moved to London because she did another, she's a double masters. So she got a master's from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. She's a gold medalist. She was selected by Ealing Council for a job. So that was the first time when we moved and I did not have a job. So I was actually not working for 6 to 9 months. And then because of personal reasons, we had to shut everything and come back because of illness in the family. But during that time, I got to know the details of what all goes on in the house because I was the house husband, literally, because she was going to day one, she was off working and I was managing the house. And I've been through the whole thing where, literally it was during winter. So when she would come back from the work, she would tell me, put the cooker on, and when she comes, we eat. But the point is, I got a completely different perspective to what are the things that women need to do. And in Singapore, it was the same thing. I had equal share of housework, which is very much taken for granted. It's a non-event for people there. In India, it's a huge deal. If a man is doing things in the house, it starts from her own mother who will say, Arey, why are you making him do things like that and stuff like that? So, yeah, a lot of things got my eyes opened internally. So, but on that, so.
Amazing, Rahul. You know what gets me thinking here? When whoever's listening to this conversation today is going to go back and have those conversations again with their spouses. That's one thing that's happening. And it also fascinates me how both of you have actually how these experiences has fed into each other's careers, like your wife taking another career path altogether.
Yeah.
And about how you actually seamlessly adapted to this thing of taking up household chores and also making so many discoveries along that path. So that's like an amazing journey. I'm so glad that I asked you that question and to flesh that answer out a lot more. And now coming to this whole concept of allyship in the workplace. So if you can tell us about what are the specific actions or initiatives that you have undertaken to address and mitigate this privilege imbalances within your organization or industry as you have seen it. If you can tell us about this in the context of improving gender diversity.
Sure. So coming to Dow India specifically, the fact is, so we work with colleges. So there was this specific initiative where we reached out to third-year students of a college, and we would pick up 10 of them, and we would have different people from within the company mentoring them. So I used to be that's the We Merge initiative, as we call it, and I was myself a mentor for two girls from the university. It would be a 9 months to a 12-month kind of initiative, and it really helped for us to also get a perspective of what the current generation is talking about, and for them to get a completely different view of what is real corporate life all about. Right, they are very very fresh. They have no idea about the real world in that sense. So that really helped. I think it was a good two-way discussion that happened. The other piece is I was talking a little bit about the panel, the hiring process. So the hiring process within our company is also very gender neutral in that sense, or it helps in the sense, until we have women candidates who have applied, we will not go through with that hiring process. And when the hiring process happens, in the panel, there has to be at least one woman. So if there are three people, at least one need to be there. So right at the source, when we start hiring people, we pay attention to this to make sure we have equal representation, or at least some representation for women on both sides before we finally hire the right person. And it's important that we still hire the best person for the job. So that's the way we look at that. So that is one. The other one is within my own sphere of work, which is MGA. We started something which is rising talent. To be fair, this was not gender neutral in that sense, but it's just rising talent who could be potential leaders of tomorrow. And then I would have, besides the other activities we would do in terms of leadership development, I would also have specific one-on-one discussions with them on their employee development plan, help them think about their longer term career, and have a much broader view of what they could do to improve themselves, as well as have a clearer vision on their long-term career, so that they can really stay longer with DAO. So these are some of the things. And of course, I'm the Win sponsor, as you talked about that. I used to be associated with the Win Group, which is again a global ERG. So it's an employee resource group. It's one of the oldest ones in India. But Dow has been having the Win Group for a long time. I was part of the Win team in Dow Singapore, and I could see that the issues being discussed there were at a totally different level. I come back to India, and the issues here are very different. So I could see that I could make a difference, and that's when I joined Dow India as the Win sponsor a couple of years ago.
That's a lot of those are a lot of initiatives. As we get to talk about it, we will be of course exploring them in the subsequent questions. But as we were talking about, you understanding the concept of the impact of privilege in at a personal level, can you share with us some instances about how this epiphany related to privilege hit you in the workplace and how that has impacted your leadership style? This is more
Yes.
specifically with your women colleagues. How did you see it? Yeah.
So there were, at least I can name two separate instances of, and this is from Singapore, so not even from India. When I was in Dow Singapore, so two people who happened to be in my team. One of them was actually based in the Philippines, so I was in touch with her when I was still in India, and we got connected on some work matter which was across the globe. But somehow we became good colleagues and friends. So we used to chat with each other. And so there was a point in time when work from Philippines also moved to Singapore, and she had to make that call, the tough call. So she did reach out to me, and we had a very frank conversation, and I helped her think through those. Because her husband was there, who he couldn't leave. He was working for the army, so there was no way he was going to get out of there. But at the same time, she really is very talented, and but she had to move out of there and come to Singapore if she wanted to progress. So just had a open discussion with her, and to some extent I think that helped for her to take that call to come there. And then after she came, we were still very much in touch, and then ultimately she was reporting to me, and we continue to have some very good productive conversations which continue to help her grow in her career by taking on some things which she was hesitant to take on. I could see that she needed just a little bit of a nudge. I mean, the talent is all there, but it's just that she was not necessarily comfortable or confident of pitching for that. So I told her, look, you have good knowledge in this area. Why don't you pitch it? You could become the global person for that niche area. And I'm so glad that she did take it up. Until today, she's very much handling one area which is global in nature out of Singapore. So that is one instance. The other instance is actually a very younger person who had just joined us, I think, a year and a half in Dow Singapore, fresh out of college. She worked in my group. She did some really good work. When she got an opportunity in another sub function, we moved her to another group. And then one day, suddenly, somebody else from my team comes to me and says she quit. So she put in her papers in the morning, and this one came to know about that. So she comes to me and says she has quit, but I think she has not got the right guidance. It'll help if you were to have a chat with her. I said, if she's already quit now, but I said, okay, if she's willing to chat, I'm willing to do that. So she brought her to me. We had a 45-minute conversation, and I could clearly see that she was more working on either peer pressure, family pressure, or whatever. But basically, she didn't have a clear understanding of what is really the long-term potential for her within Dow. And just because she had not progressed in terms of a level, I think she was comparing with some other folks. Oh, you can get this or get that if you're outside. And once I told her how she already had moved from one role to another in such a short period of time, and she really has good talent, somehow she actually went back and retracted her resignation letter. And the good thing about all this is she's still in the company, and she didn't get promoted till at least 2 more years. But when she did, she actually called me. I was not in touch with her, but she approached me when that happened. And till now, every time during birthday, she will wish me. She's very much in touch with me. So I was glad that that one conversation, for me, it was just a conversation. I'd forgotten about it. But 2 years later, she comes and, reaches out to me. So I felt glad that, just having that kind of a talk could help her. So when you talk about being in privilege, I don't know it is necessarily a gender thing, but I think sometimes it could be depending on how in the earlier example, it was a case of just nudging someone,
Mhm.
and that's all it took. But she's doing fantastically well.
I'm sure these are the moments that actually make you feel very, very happy that you chose to take those steps and those actions and be vocal about a few things. That because the impact that you seem to have you have seen is must be so gratifying for you,
It
isn't
is,
it?
in fact, I think that's one of the reasons I got the award that you folks gave me, because both of them wrote this nomination for me, which I was surprised. They are the two of them have written as part of the nomination
Amazing,
for this,
amazing.
right? So out of it was, yeah, unexpected in that
And I'm
sense.
sure those anecdotes actually should be motivating for a lot more male allies out there to, who must be out there thinking, I'm making so many efforts. So what is the impact? And this is the impact. This is how it looks. I'm glad that you portrayed it for them to see it. And so how do you? And you were also talking about these conversations you have with your women colleagues, and but that's one part of course, allyship. But how do you navigate conversations about privilege with colleagues who actually might not fully understand or acknowledge its impact? This is for I'm talking about the uninitiated or those who see it as something that is not so significant. You're talking about it, but what is the effect? Those questions.
So sure. So one another example I can give. So same company, somebody many years ago got a job in US. That's our headquarters. And just like in my case, many years ago in another company, he without think meaning he basically signed up for it going to US. Now his wife was doing very well here in a different thing. So I had a chat with him, and I said, it's great for you as a career thing, but Dow is a big company. Have you tried to think about what is it that we can do for her? And maybe because it's big enough that potentially she could also get some job in another function, sub function. So I'm glad he really did then, meaning, I don't know, maybe he was feeling awkward to broach it with his company at that time. But again, that conversation may have helped, but he definitely did that. And I was glad because after about 3 months or so, he would land up there. He connected her with me to get some tips on what she could talk. So I was very glad to have that conversation with his wife, whom I had otherwise never met. But I was glad to see that she finally got a job in another sub function, and she was approaching me in that sub function for some tips because that was more aligned to my function and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess so. This in this case, of course, it impacted him personally and her in that sense. So maybe he had more of that. But yeah, I mean, there are other cases where I just make people aware. In another case, similar case, but his wife was not working here, so she was not going to work when she was moving there too. But I was just telling him when he was getting an opportunity, some another person, when he was getting an opportunity to move abroad, that please think about the impact you have on the rest of your family, especially your wife, because she's going to be moving into a new country. You will start working in the same kind of environment from day one, and then, but that's going to be a very, very big change for her. So I could see something move. Because you're not necessarily thinking, oh, it's simple, it's down, and stuff like that. But it's important to have the whole perspective when you take up jobs like this. So yeah, that's something.
Have you ever experienced some pushback from anybody when you broach these conversations around privilege and you show them the other side of the story? Has it ever happened so far?
Well, I wouldn't say pushback to be fair, but definitely I've seen complaints. So I've seen this happen many times where uh, I've seen it in, to be fair, I've not seen it in my sub function. I've seen it in some others where somebody gets promoted, a woman leader gets promoted, and then there is this coffee talk with, oh, she's got selected only because she's a woman. And that's when I actually intervene, saying, on what basis are you saying that? I mean, you really don't know what's behind it, right? And that's why I also feel sad for the women who really earned their way up there. But people think that, of course, there is this diversity. We track diversity, even in our company, we track diversity. But I know for a fact, at least I have seen whatever I have seen. I have not seen any bias in the way the selection process happens. At least wherever I have got involved. But that's always a challenge. I think people tend to see that, and especially if roles start to get limited, Then if a woman would get it versus a man, then the man tends to feel a little bit insecure. And oh, there's a quota system and stuff like that. And that's unfortunate. And that's something we need to really get over. And that's also one of the challenges to your first question on leadership and stuff like that. So that's why, unfortunately, it's true that women tend to have to work a lot harder to prove themselves compared to a man. And I understand that. I mean, it's just the way it is because of this reason about how they get perceived by others. Yeah.
That's a very, very, very profound statement that you made. The women have to work harder than
Yeah.
than a man to actually make that to have the world notice that they can make an
Correct.
impact, and in their own
Correct.
inimitable style. That's great. That's a very,
Correct.
very candid observation. Thank you so much for saying this on this forum. And so having had straddled these conversations around allyship, talking about a very what you call uncomfortable topic, but a very, very pertinent topic called privilege. What would be your advice to other leaders looking for becoming effective allies to address privilege in their respective workplace?
I think the toughest one, but that's where it needs to start, is at home. Honestly, at home. I don't know how many Indian males really look at their relationship with their wives and their parents if they're staying with their parents at home. So, and that's really a tough one to crack. And like I said, I've been very fortunate to have my wife, Rupal, in my life, and that's how I've learned. But first, look into yourself and how are you behaving at home, and that's the starting point. That itself will shake something inside you if you really do it. And then you look around in work and start seeing everything with that lens. I mean, you have to make a conscious effort. So whenever there are certain decisions made, or for example, you can observe, I've seen this happen. So you're in meetings where everyone except one person is a man. And if you are in that situation, nothing, if nothing else, just do an observation of how many times is it that she has spoken up, or how many times have you encouraged her to speak up. Just make an observation, don't do anything, just for a few meetings, just make an observation, self introspect, and things will change. If you truly self introspect, you may make a difference the next time you have that conversation. And you can actually, there's no harm in reaching out to that person outside of the meeting to say, you know what, in this situation, because I've done that with a few people, that, oh, in this situation I know that you know this stuff, but I didn't hear you speak up. Why? You know it, just speak up, right? So again, it's that nudge. So nothing grand. I think it's on a one-on-one basis. If you do things with people, that's probably good enough. And in your own small way, you can make some changes. Structurally, it will help if you can. If there's a company like Dow where we have a lot of programs that are there, uh, especially to encourage this. So we have the ERG group. We also have a specific VLD initiative, which is a Women Executive Leadership Development Program. So that's a unique program because that program is run in India only by women. In fact, men are not even in part of that. It's run only by women for women. And of course, men are partnered in the sense we come in to support specific initiatives or learning sessions and sharing sessions and stuff like that. But it's run by them. So they know what the issues are. They're also helping address that with them. So it helps to be in a company like that. But doesn't matter. I think whichever company you are in, whether there's a structured program or not, we can surely make a difference on a one-on-one basis. I think that's really what it is.
Yeah, so it actually, as they say, like with everything charity, as they say, like charity begins at home,
Yep.
allyship also begins at home. That's a very, very
Yeah.
practical tip there out there. I'm sure that's a good start for most men looking out for the perfect start to their allyship initiatives. So coming back to the workplace, how do you encourage inclusivity and diversity while also addressing privilege, ensuring a balanced and fair work environment? Is there something that needs to be done specifically for that? Because equity and inclusion is they are intertwined. So
Yeah.
how do you tackle with that? Yeah.
I think so. That's what having making sure that the importance is there right from the top. So we've been blessed because the top leaders talk about this, right? So building the case for having women in leadership position has been talked about properly right from the top. So there's a clear tone from the top as to the need for having that diversity in leadership positions. And then when it comes down to the environment, yeah, having safe space for people to talk about issues is important. So having this Win ERG group that we have, that's an excellent group where, I mean, obviously I'm the sponsor. We have males who are also either allies, they declare themselves as allies, or they're just Win ERG members. But we have multiple sessions where we have open discussion on tough topics. For example, it's the Win ERG which recently put in an event for on the event of International Men's Day, and we actually called a professional to come and talk about mental health issues in men, and that is a topic that Win ARG talk up. So it's very unusual, right? But it was well attended, and people really opened up. And we talked about how women tend to still talk about things with other women. Men tend to keep things to themselves, and that could result in mental health issues. I'm just giving this is a different topic, but just an example. So you need to have an environment where we can openly talk about issues and get people engaged in a conversation. I think, yeah, if you have a space like that for people to do that, that makes a big difference in itself. So WinARG is one example. But when it comes to hiring decisions, promotions, this whole thing about having a panel, a proper panel, which has a diverse panel, independently evaluating everyone on certain parameters, and then selecting the best candidate for the job, I think that's also very important. And for leaders to continue to have the right tone from the top and keep spreading this message that this is how we select people. It's not based on gender, it's based on the right person for the job. So those are things that need to be continuously perpetuated, basically.
Actually, Rahul, as you're talking about this, I had this one question that came up in my mind. You've already, of course, addressed the thing of, what kind of adverse response or adverse reaction you can have to this. But also, what is that you would tell your male ally, those aspiring to be male allies, or those who have set on this journey just now? What should they watch out for? Is there something that they should be wary of? Because we also have this thing of this tokenism that comes, which can be sometimes a barrier to allyship in itself, because it's not that they're doing it intentionally, but it would be something that they're not aware of, because they are first timers as allies. So what would those barriers or the challenges that you think they should be wary of?
Yeah, I think you actually shouldn't even get into male allyship if you don't sincerely believe in it. That's why I said, I come back to the earlier point. If you have the courage, practice it at home. If you think you can do it at home, you can do it at work. That's a challenge in itself. So it's not easy, but that's how you should do it. And at work, if you do it from a tokenism point of view, it will show. I mean, in your first conversation with the person, those things will just come out, and then they're not going to trust you, and they're not going for the future conversations won't happen. So you won't really achieve your objective. So if you're doing it, do it with commitment. Otherwise, don't do it. That's what I would say. And follow other leaders. There are many. There hopefully are enough examples around where people have had genuine conversations and genuine things have happened in the right way, which you can see around. And thankfully, we see a lot of example of that in Dow pretty much every other month. So yeah.
So what does allyship look like on a day-to-day basis? Is there something that you have to do every day? Like we say, as you practice makes the man perfect. So is there a practice or an exercise that he needs to undertake every day when it comes to allyship? To actually, we won't talk about perfection here. That is a very, very far-fetched and a very utopian concept, but an excellent ally, if we can go there.
So I think, yeah, to be fair, I don't have a structured, oh, today I'm going to do this. It has become, to some extent, it's become part of me, and that's how it should be. But if you are in the journey, you want to consciously start doing it, you should have a daily or a weekly target. And it can start with as simple thing as, okay, in this meeting where you're going into a meeting where you know that there are very few women in the room, observe your behavior, observe that person's behavior, and see what is it that you're doing after the meeting, to have a conversation with that person to see how things have changed later on. And in a month, pick up any one women in your group, have a career conversation with that person to help figure out the longer term thing, and then see how that conversation is going. And maybe it'll help, And all these things take time. That's the other thing. You should be wary of trying to seek immediate results. This is not something, oh, you do this and you immediately get something out. And you're not doing it for results. It's a culture change, right? So it's just the way you act and the way you create that environment. And ultimately, everybody's going to do things for themselves. You are only there to facilitate. That's all. Don't think that because of you something has happened. No, it's ultimately that person who's going to take charge. It's just a little bit nudge that you may need. That's all.
That's a great philosophy out there, Rahul. Do your duty. Fruit
Yeah,
will follow. The fruit of
correct,
that
correct.
duty and the effort will follow. To quote from the ancient wisdom of Bhagavad Gita.
Yes,
So that's
that's true.
amazing. Can you also share an example of a successful initiative or program you have implemented that aim to reduce privilege disparities within the organization? So here we are actually trying to understand how these two come together. If
Yeah,
you can
so
talk
so so even in so let's take my own organization now, because we really practiced. It's a relatively new, not new now. It's 5 years old, but because we started this global accounting team, we very much had these hiring practices. So I'm glad to say that we have, I mean, almost 50% women representation in the entire team. Having said that, I also realized and we don't have enough representation in the leadership, the leadership within MGA. So that's something that we consciously started working on a couple of years ago, and that's why we have more discussions with rising talent, put in specific coaching efforts. We also got in some external coaches for some of the leaders to really develop the leaders of tomorrow. And also within the group, I was glad that one woman actually got a role outside of India, and she moved. She was the first one to move. So that was from our team within just 3 years of our team forming. So that was also a big win for us in that sense. And yeah, I mean, the other things are structural that are going on. It's a company-wide thing, whether it's the Weld Initiative, Win ERG there. I'm sponsoring Win, so I keep pushing for programs which would help have discussions on tough topics. On a personal note, this is my personal thing. I like the topic of personal financial planning. So I have actually conducted multiple sessions. I've now covered almost 400 employees, and I just cover 18 people at a time. But I had specific sessions for women in from the Win ERG, where I covered the topic of personal financial planning, because unfortunately in India, women tend to think, meaning many, I'm not saying all, but many women tend to think that all the financial decisions should be taken by the man, which is completely rubbish. And actually, even the men, because I have lots of men who come in my sessions, they also are not practicing the right personal financial planning things. So that is a session that I do every month. I have at least one session to whoever is interested, just to share that knowledge and equip them to become better at managing their personal financial life, actually, in that sense.
That's great because that's end-to-end allyship, if I can call it. I don't know if there is a term like that, but that's basically looking at allyship from various levels, because it probably just doesn't stop with career and
Oh, yeah,
career-related
yeah,
decisions, right? Of course, career is
absolutely.
also about how it fulfills your other expectations, your
Yeah,
requirements.
yeah.
So that's great. And at this juncture, actually, I wanted to clarify a few things because these may
Mhm.
sound very, very overlapping or very similar, but who else but an expert to talk about it? So we have allyship, mentorship, sponsorship, and coaching. How do these differ, and or how are they uh, you know uh, tightly how are they intertwined, and how do they differ? What is the technical difference among these four concepts? Because I
Sure.
do
Yeah,
understand that
thanks.
it gets, yeah,
Yeah,
misunderstood.
thanks for raising that. That's an interesting one. So you can be an ally in a very simple way. So, for example, I said we have the Win ERG group. Males who are joining there can say they are allies of Win. So they are just attending events. That's it. They are just showing their support by being present when something is happening. They're not doing anything more. But you can take allyship to a totally different level by playing all those roles that you talked about. So allyship can be in either way. When it comes to being a mentor, that's a more specific one-on-one discussion where typically an experienced person will have with somebody more junior, where you're sharing stories, guiding the person, maybe saying that, oh, you could get in touch with this or you could do this. So again, helping from a career point of view, especially someone who's been there in the company for a certain number of time. That's again very different from a coach. A coach is going to help you develop a particular skill gap, basically help address a specific skill gap. And a sponsor is again very different, where he or she is specifically speaking about you in leadership forums or in places where there are job offers happening and you're trying to select someone. This is the person who will really build your case and fight it all the way up. So I would say this is at a high level, this would be the difference between the different terms that you just talked.
Thanks for differentiating those for us, because that is something that we've been thinking. It often gets, interchangeably used.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
true. That's
to
true.
actually dispel that myth. Thank you so much. And so this is one question that actually comes up when we are almost nearing the end of this
Mhm.
discussion. Is there something called as a succession planning for allies? Do you do that? Because over these years, I'm sure you have been seeing younger colleagues come in, and I'm sure you must have inspired so many. So how do you do the succession planning for allyship? Because, and also allies should be at all levels and in all sub functions, as you mentioned. So how do you
Well,
do it?
no, that's a fair point. I don't think we have gone to that extent yet about having a succession plan for allies, because ultimately it does need to come from inside, right? So it's only when you feel like you need to be, that's where you'll take it. So, like you said, the only way it will work is if your actions are able to inspire someone enough in the organization so that he would also take this up on his own. And we are always there for guidance. So you can always come and approach and have a chat about, okay, how do you do this? But I don't think it's such a difficult thing if you get over your mental and your inner issues, basically. Once you get over that, it will just happen. It should be natural. It shouldn't necessarily be talked about. I was honestly very surprised to get the award per se. So I never did it for the award, right? So that's how it should be. Otherwise, what's the point? So it's very individual. It's very individual.
We are going to be having one more question. I
Mhm.
would invite the audience to actually drop their questions in the chat window, and we can pick it up from there. This is something that you, of course, have been addressing, Rahul, from the beginning. We have been talking about it in here and there in various versions about allyship. But how do you ensure that your efforts toward recognizing and understanding addressing privilege are sustained and not just limited to specific moments or events? So this, of course, goes closely with this question of how do you, what does allyship on a day-to-day looks like? But I think this is where we should be talking about performative allyship also, which many of us have been warning against. So what is that you do to ensure that this is a sustained one?
Yeah, so I think so that does depend on the company's environment. So if you do have a group, so we have a very formal WIN ERG, which addresses exactly this need for women and male allies to get together and discuss topics of interest on a regular basis. And every year we would send out surveys to understand from the WIN ERG members as to what are the topics that they want to work on, and that then have some events around it in the next year. And that's worked really well, and I think that's how you can structurally do that. The other piece is what we talked about, the hiring process. So when you talk about structurally managing this, making sure that you have equal representation for women in hiring, in interviewing, and then making sure you have the best person for the job. um, and yeah, we don't have any recognition for allies or something within our company, but yeah, I think people do it. People see the value on their own. It's not something that's necessarily talked about. You can be, yeah, you can volunteer to be specifically a mentor for specific rising talent, right? So that's something that one can always do. So we have a good mentorship program, and we have the structural women executive leadership program. So a lot of male allies are picked to become the mentors or coaches or sponsors for these women. So that's structural, and therefore this is sustainable in that sense. The rest of it is purely individual in terms of what you have on a one-on-one basis.
So allyship is something that you got into subconsciously, and it has become a very, very
Yes,
integral part of your
correct,
of your career and as your personality.
correct.
So if I would, this is a very, very basic question, and I'm asking you this in the end of this Q&A. That's because I want to understand, I want to summarize this whole journey that you have traveled. What is just a very, very simple question. It's like a rapid fire question, just one, but I have given you so much of a prelude to that. Allyship actually is, if you can complete that sentence for us, that would summarize this whole discussion.
Allyship is, it's a journey for a man to discover himself and see what you can do for the other side. That's all. To help achieve the true potential of anyone.
Thank you, Rahul. That was so beautifully summarized, and for having such a very candid conversation, exploring every bit of allyship. And I can also see, and I'm sure all our audiences did see, how you have actually stayed invested in this particular journey. And as you said, this is not a destination. It's something I'm sure that you are learning so much in this process as well. So, and I don't think anybody else could have been a better brand ambassador for allyship than you have, because of the passion and the openness with which you have shared your experiences today. I'm sure there are a lot of men out there listening in our organization, also those who have joined us today. I'm sure it's like, oh, I want to do that too. You know, that kind of an aspirational goal set in their minds today towards allyship. So this is a great conversation. We'll just stay for 30 seconds to take some more questions. Do we have any questions? Yes, can we? Okay, this is a very, very pertinent question. Says, thank you for such a profound session. Can we choose who to be allies with, or is it a universal responsibility? Yes.
I think ultimately we do end up choosing whom to be allied with. I mean, I can say that yes, it should be a universal responsibility, but unless I believe in something, I'm not going to work on it, right? So we may say, all of us may say it's a universal responsibility, but it doesn't work. Ultimately, it has to come from within. So, yeah.
Okay. So, as in, do you also choose whom do you want to be an ally of?
No, not really. Honestly, I just see. So that's why I've been in so many presentations with different functions where the way the person had presented, I actually just go out and give feedback later on, whether it's positive or it's improvement area, but I just go and do it. And I've seen it because it's a very small thing. It will be just 1 minute thing, but it can make a big difference because I've seen feedback come years later. Oh, you had this conversation with me and that made a difference. And after that, I'm really working on that. And it helped me so much. So you would be, so this is again a privilege. You are a leader. And if you are genuinely giving feedback to a person with the right intention, it will stick and it will really help that person. And you should never do it with an intention of it coming back, right? But the fact is, it may come back. So
that's an interesting. Okay, so somebody's asking about performative allyship. How can we move beyond performative allyship and actively dismantle old systems and move towards a more equitable workspace?
Yeah, that's a much bigger question about how do we move to more equitable workspace.
Yes.
No, I think unfortunately, at least in India, we still are, because I've worked abroad, because I worked in Singapore and in Philippines. And let's in both Singapore and Philippines, actually, it was a woman-dominated population in the workforce in both places. In fact, in Philippines, it was 19, and when I joined, I had 33 people reporting to me, and there were only, there were 2 LGBTQ and 1 male. All the rest were females. So culturally, they are in a very different place. In India, we still have a long way to go to get over the mindset about equitable works. I think first we need to be equitable in our mindsets at home. If we truly are equitable at home and we treat our spouse as an equal partner and show it, I think that's when things will change in the workspace too. We can do a lot of things, but yeah.
Right, and summarizing it rightly in the chat window, which is saying inclusion begins at home.
Oh
That's
yeah,
great.
absolutely.
That's great. That's great. I think also, Rahul, I would like to add in my own humble way that the biggest a trait for an ally is to be very generous. And I think that also you have illustrated today with so much of frank and open conversations, and for every question that came by with the most heartfelt response that it actually elicited from you. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation that you have had with us today.
Thank you. Thanks.
So awesome to be listening to your journey. And I'm sure that as you go by, you will be adding a lot more what do you call the aspiring allies and a lot more fans who would actually look up to you to understand your allyship journey to chart their own. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks for that. Thank you. Bye.
So wasn't that such an inspirational conversation, audiences? I'm sure you would also wholeheartedly agree with me. And thanks for such a wonderful participation. And you have been such a wonderful audience as always. With this, we are going steady with our Diversity Mahotsav, the month-long celebration, and which is powered by our partner, Kellogg Brown and Root Engineering and Construction India Private Limited, and supporting partners Genesis and EPAM, and our outreach partner, MCCI, Madras Chamber of Commerce and Industries. To reiterate, our social media hashtags are hashtag Diversity Mahotsav, hashtag Celebrating Diversity. Do post your experience at Diversity Mahotsav on your SM handles with the hashtags. On behalf of Team Avatar, I thank each one of you and welcome you to the next few days of Diversity Mahotsav. And please note that Diversity Mahotsav is on till December 22nd, and it's only on weekdays between 4 and 5 p.m. As we draw close to the day, I'm going to request you to take a couple of minutes and provide your feedback on today's session. I request you to bring up the poll, please. How would you rate today's session on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the minimum and 5 being the maximum? How would you rate a speaker's session on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the minimum and 5 being the maximum? Is there anything else you wish to be covered as in today's topic? Please do drop those suggestions as well. Would you like us to would you like to suggest a topic for us that you wish to hear during Diversity Mahotsav? If yes, please also give your suggestion from today's in the text box. What is your takeaway from today's session? So these are the questions. So please take your time and fill in the feedback. We have another exciting day tomorrow with a panel of speakers who will be speaking on the topic multiverse of Gen Z and millennials. So a bit about this session. These digital natives born between 1981 and 1996 are the millennials, and the Gen Zs born after 1996 have introduced a unique set of dynamics into the workforce, from their technological prowess to their distinctive values and preferences. However, beneath the surface, there are a multitude of fascinating and quirky aspects of this generational cohort's interactions with their employers and colleagues that can be explored. So this topic delves into the challenges faced by employers when working with millennials in a light-hearted and thought-provoking manner. So in this session, we have Ruchi Mathur, Global Commercial Marketing Head, Networks and Security, Rockwell Automation. And then we also have Zarina Katkol, HR Leader, India, Cargill Business Services. And we have Rashmi Ravindran, AVP Marcom and User Experience Avatar Group as the moderator. So please do tune in today, tomorrow, the same time at 4 p.m. This is going to be another cracker of a session, so you wouldn't want to miss that. Please visit www.myavatar.com to explore various opportunities and activities that celebrate diversity. If you have not registered at myavatar.com yet, do log on to myavatar.com and register now. Browse through to find jobs that might suit your skill sets, read articles of interest, upskill yourself through various webinars conducted exclusively for you. So signing off today again is Janani Sampath. Stay tuned with us. Stay safe. Take care. See you again tomorrow.